A very good evening to our viewers. Thank you for joining us tonight on the Evening Review. My name is Peter Kalangula, your host. Tonight we are hosting Nelson Kalangula. He's an author of the book A Namibian of Stature, and this is an autobiography, or biography if you like, of Reverend Peter Kalangula, who was, of course, a very active actor in the space of Namibian politics in the late 70s, 80s, and of course, even in post-independence Namibia. Thank you, Nelson, for gracing our platform. Congratulations, first and foremost. This looks like a very, very professionally done book, and I can't wait to indulge myself into it. But first and foremost, congratulations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Njebela. And by the way, he's Bishop.
Bishop, yes. What did I say?
Peter Kalangula.
Did I not? Did
Reverend.
I just? Yeah,
Right.
Bishop. Yeah, no, so sorry.
Yes.
Bishop Peter Kalangula. That is the correct reference. If you can give us a sense first of what the book is about.
Well, the book in its entirety is just sort of to give that history of Namibia that we never really gave shine on. As you remember, and as we recall, it is a disease that is continuing today. If you were of a different ideology and a different opposition, or so to say, of a different team, and not in support of the exile and those that went to liberate the country outside, you were labeled a puppet and so forth. So I saw this in this gentleman, Peter Kalangula, as I followed his story while I was growing up, as I got to know him. Something that followed me all the way in towards my career in the military, when I served in the Air Force, you could hear people would clearly label you that you are a son of the puppet and so forth, the Landwambongo as they used to call it, or collaborator, if you may. So this prompted me to dig more information into him, and lucky enough, fate and everything, circumstances was drawing me near to him, and which eventually got me to know his associates, his people that he normally used to share a career with back then. And some of those, especially his close friend, is the one that drew me to some of the text that he wrote and perused about him. But the story really is about his political life, which actually started from Chicago as an interpreter. And then, of course, he continued to serve as a clerk in the administration back then, before the South African Nationalist Party took over in the early 50s. So it cascaded all the way to how he ended up landing himself into politics, but in between there, he became also a clergyman, a pastor, and that's where he started to liberate his people through the movement, through church. Kalangula is actually known through his liberal type of nature in the church, where he had a fallout with the Bishop Winter. It was a team of Shannon Mallory and all that. It's a whole Odibo story that brings with. So as you know, many people roots from Odibo as such. And then it drives all the way to him becoming a minister of a minister of works and transport at the time. And then later a minister of education, which led him to drive Afrikaans out of Ovamboland, and said people in Ovamboland should rather be taught English. And that is the reason why you hardly find Afrikaans there.
Yeah.
As a result, many schools such as Gabriel Tapopi, Mwench Pandeka, the roads up there were built and the hospitals were extended and so forth. So many other things that I felt that perhaps we are not mentioning these things because we are focused on a one-side of the story. Because these guys were labeled and they were called names, but what about their work?
Absolutely.
And how far did they come? What do we do with that history? Do we just throw it away?
I hear
Or do
you.
we keep it?
I think for our viewers, it's just important to also explain that the author, Mr. Nelson Kalangula here, is a grandson of Bishop, the late Bishop Peter Kalangula. Now, you brought something very important to the fore there, Nelson, by saying that the impression is that anybody who held a political view different or contrary to that of SWAPO at the time, you were automatically labeled as a collaborator and whatnot. In your grandfather's case, the problem came from the association with DTA at the time, because DTA is simply seen as the DTA of those years is simply seen as a puppet party that won the 1978 election with the help of the apartheid regime, and the fact that it was sort of elected, but the South African apartheid regime remained in charge of Namibia at the time. It is simply perceived as a party that did not, that actually danced to the tunes of South Africa, apartheid South Africa, and the fact that also DTA got a lot of support from this South African regime, even in the 1989 election. Do you think that is an unfair assessment?
Well, everyone is entitled to their opinion, and of course, as you say, they seen DTA and such. First of all, they should educate themselves how DTA started. That is an alliance, a democratic Ten Hill alliance, which happened at the Ten Hill building that is close to the police station in Windhoek. Now, this is where many different ethnic leaders or different parties from ethnic groups met to form sort of what you may call a coalition or a caucus before election, or to form a government from within. Now, of course, there were other factions, of course, within the country that came together. But then in that instance, you could see that the blacks were sort of aside and the whites were aside. Now, Kalangula's point was, why do you label the blacks aside as Ovambo, Damara, Nama, Kavango, Herero, and so forth, while the whites just remain whites? Why they are Boers, they are Germans, they are English? So this was the problem. But then DTA remained a party that is formed in Namibia. And their aim was to negotiate for independence. And mind you, whether we go to war or not, we all know that the independence gets to be negotiated. You all need to sit at the table with terms. And this is what I explained in the book, that this book is not to shun those that went to the liberation and to fight. By that itself, it expedited this negotiation that took place. But the DTA played its role to negotiate. Was it an easy negotiation? It was not. If you follow history quite well, independence was being negotiated already from the 70s at the time. And there are other stories also that are coming, that there were also delay tactics from abroad, from exile. But they do not bring those stories forward. So we need to understand the historical aspect of things, on how things manifested and developed, so we can understand where we are going to. But we need to get to the root of things. Of course, if you look at DTA to say that they collaborated, and of course, I would say yes. Would you say the same with the same parties that are doing failures that are worse more than the apartheid were doing at the time? Would you call them the same, or would you accord them the same courtesy to say that they are collaborators of something that is clearly impoverishing the Namibian nation? I say that these people were serving their people in the country. And that's the only platform they could attend to. DTA was a powerhouse, and they ought to work together as such.
So in the book, Nelson, you are talking, for example, about the events in around, I think, 1976 or 1975, around about. You are saying that when Kalangula joined the Ovambo Legislation Assembly, he was a member of the National Democratic Party. Its leader was King Philemon Shumbwa Eliphas, who was the 16th king of Ondonga and the chief minister of Wamboland, who was assassinated on 16 August 1975
Right.
at Onamagongwa.
Yes.
Now, just the death of Shumbwa, which we are told at the time that it was the Swapo people who sneaked into Namibia, assassinated the men, and maybe ran back into Angola, or whatever the circumstances were. These assassinations were being committed because of that very belief that these are the people who are actually betraying the Namibian people. These are the people who are delaying the independence of Namibia. These are the people who are collaborating with the South African regime in many ways, and therefore they ought to be terminated at the time. Maybe your grandfather was only very lucky not to have been the target of this kind of things. So in fact, you told me at once that he was also targeted for assassination.
So,
are those not indications that people were simply seen, or perhaps not, maybe they were really just collaborators?
when we talk about that part of history, we need to understand and to question ourselves which people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, you need to understand
So these are Swapo people
the history,
primarily. Yes.
the history behind that. Remember that Swapo first went to Zambia,
Yeah.
and of course, together with Tanganyika, and that's how later on they ended to Angola,
Yeah.
which I understand was one of the decisions of the late General Dimo Amambo, who pushed his people that side. But then the story is, when Angola got its independence, South Africa saw that there were no friendly forces on that border, because that border was not closed anymore, because those colonizers there had slacked. And this is one of the gateways where Shumbwa got assassinated, because people were moving freely along that borderline. But it does not start with Shumbwa. It starts with Ushona Yashimi. Because if you check the Ovambo administration in 1968, where it started, Ushona Yashimi also died mysterious death. He was a king of Ongajera. So it started with him, and later on, it went to Shumbwa. So you could see that in order to pass down service delivery to reach the people, who did they have to go through? Who has the power of people? I mean, it's taking place up to now. The government still works with the traditional authority, but we do not say anything much. It's the same system. Those that say it's any different and so forth,
Yeah.
it's no different, because it seems like we are still ran from South Africa up to now.
No, but,
Yeah.
but the difference is that this is a legitimately elected government of Namibia. The
Yes.
people, the indigenous people of Namibia elected this government. We did not elect the South African government, and therefore that is why we opposed that government. It was a foreign government.
Absolutely. No, but would you rather let the people quiet when people are knocking for their people to receive services? This is how the water came to the people. This is how the services such as hospitals or whatever came to the people. Speak of roads, schools, education, the list goes on. If these people would have kept quiet and all of them went in exile, would we have really gotten and found this country with such beautiful resources, infrastructure? I don't think so. Because somewhere there needed to be a gatekeeper somewhere, someone that would say, look, gentlemen, you are going too far. This is still our country.
The argument, Nelson, is also that people like your grandfather,
Right.
who served in this administration, the Ovambo administration as it was called and whatnot, they actually helped to legitimize the occupation of Namibia by South Africa, because the entire world was saying, including the United Nations, were saying, look, your protectorate mandate has ended. You must now leave these people alone.
Right.
So that they embark upon their self-determination.
Yeah.
And South Africa kept saying, no, but we are working well with the people. We have even given them power. They are in charge of their own affairs. So that they can make that kind of argument to the United Nations and therefore continue to occupy the country, that, oh, they are not very harmful, they have given power to the people. So the argument is that your grandfather actually legitimized the occupation in that way.
According to the data I've collected and the people that I've interviewed, that's not the case. What had happened, he even stated it in his interview that is on YouTube, that there was a difference between what SWAPO was fighting for and what they inside the country were fighting for. Yeah. They felt that they were in with the people, and the people wanted that independence because they were feeling the fire. But together serving with those people, they were negotiating independence. And we must remember that Kalangula was a pacifist. He was not a person who believed in war or fighting through arms. He was a person who believed in fighting internally and negotiating for independence. And this is what happened, that he felt that SWAPO wanted to take the country by force, and that's why part of the independence was delayed from exile as well. There are many stories that are flying around as such. Books were written about that we have read also. Information is there. And as people are talking, this is one of the reasons why I wrote the book. The book is not really to say that everything is, it's not debatable, but it's to open a ground to say that we need to document our history for learning purposes. I'm not saying Kalangula was perfect. I'm not saying he did everything right. Everyone is a human being as we are, and we all lead in our different circumstances. But the idea is, with his flaws, with his success, let it be recorded. And there are many others that we are not speaking for, that are not known to this day, but we are just glorifying one side of a story. Yeah. This is the point that I'm making.
So why then, if people like Kalangula, Joba and others, Franz Papa Ndongo, they served in the same government of Ovamboland, if they were such patriotic and brilliant Namibians who simply opted to fight without guns, fight from inside, without guns, and in a more peaceful, diplomatic way, why then did the result come out the way they did in 1989? This SWAPO administration, this SWAPO party, which was really, which faced a lot of propaganda from inside the country, from the likes of DTA, of course, aided by the South African regime. This alien party won. And the majority of those people that your grandfather served in the North actually went for this administration. This to me says they were craving for independence, which did not exist. In fact, I had an interesting interview this week, which will air on Sunday, with Henk Maj, who claims that apartheid ended with the election of DTA, saying that the whites dominated until 1978 roundabout, but once DTA took over, black people gained back their country, they took back their country. But here we have Kalangula and others who were still fighting in the 80s.
Of course.
So why did, because if they would have been, if those guys were the heroes of the Vambu and black people in the country at the time, they would have made their mark in 1989.
Absolutely. This is where you need to understand that there was a different faction there within that. Remember that Kalangula only served the DTA for 2 years as a president. And then he moved out to start his own party, Christian Democratic Action for Social Justice, to save the Ovambo people only, because he wanted nothing to do with the interim government, as they called it. There was a problem with, of course, as you would call it, propaganda from outside and so forth. There was a problem already internally among those that were running the country. You see, the country was run from the central government, of course, that they called interim government at the time. Then they pass on information to run with other, Ovambo administration and so forth. And this is where it came. Now, Kalangula remained part of the Ovambo administration. And he was so stubborn to the fact that his people come first. And this is how he formed up a committee that anyone who steps on the fields of my people in Ovamboland, they must report to that committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was talking to the Kofod general, this Sterk Dreyer, at the time, reporting that you should stop doing this and these people should report. These were type of his fights that he was doing in Novemberland. As a result, he became an outcast of that government as well in the 80s. If you check most of his news, he made it in the 80s.
I know.
And this is where most of it, he started talking really and pushing back. But then also to answer your question, why would a party coming from outside with to a government that have so much power and so forth? One would put it this way, it is also happening in the current situation as well. There is outside parties that are giving threats now to the current. So, the politics...
They haven't won. They have not won.
Absolutely, but the pressure is there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, with the right ideology and the right support from the people, people would succumb. But do we say that all of the people in SWAPO are corrupt or all the people are what? We do not say that. This is not how we are going to label people.
Yeah.
Afterwards, the idea is just to say that everyone served, regardless of whatever position they were. These were very difficult times that these gentlemen served in. The idea is, what are we drawing lessons from?
The difference between the SWAPO of those years and the internal leaders like your grandfather, the difference is that SWAPO wanted nothing to do with the apartheid regime. They refused to collaborate in any way with those guys. Your grandfather could have said, look, I'm not a military kind of person, I'm a clergyman, I'm a man of God, and my fight will be through the word of God and other activities, for argument's sake. But outside the confines of any administration. But he chose to become a minister and lived a very good life, getting a salary and other perks as a minister under the administration while the country is still occupied. For me, that is where the problem is. Because he could have said, look, because there are others who fought from within without having to join this government.
But Toivo, I don't get you now here, because you're saying that people should not accept ministerial positions when they are called to serve under circumstances.
Called by who?
Even though
it's called by that administration.
He was part of the Legislative Assembly at the time. Yeah,
yes.
Of course, doing and drawing laws in Novemberland. I don't understand why he would not choose the opportunity to represent his people.
No.
In that capacity.
That was I said earlier.
It's normal to say any leader would go. I mean, you yourself, if you were in the country at the time, would you really sit back and say, no, I don't want to be labeled, or I would rather sit back and relax while you watch the foreigners administer your country?
So let me tell you something that is an example that I'm going to give you of my parents.
Right.
They did not go to war, but they fed, my mother, for example, fed continuously the SWAPO soldiers.
Right.
Whenever they sneaked into our country, and our villages are very close to the borders, they would come to our houses. Our parents risked their lives because they knew that if they were caught feeding SWAPO soldiers, they'll be shot without any question. But that is their small contribution towards fighting from within, if you can even call it a fight.
Right.
So to say that one of the ways to do it was to serve in the administration, because I can tell you, during that very administration, your common person in Novemberland was demanding independence.
Right.
And all the traditional chiefs in the north at the time, all of them, who had these big things put up at their palaces to protect them from SWAPO attacks, all those people were considered by a common person in the north that time as a puppet.
Right.
So society couldn't have been just saying words for the sake of it. This is because they were concerned about these leaders like your grandfather.
Look, this is where we talk and say that people do not speak stories. This book came out to take that discomfort away.
Yeah.
Watch me, and we shall remind this in the future.
Yeah.
People will start talking, and they'll come out with their stories. Who says Kalangula did not save anyone during his time as he was serving in the administration? Many will not come forward to talk, I tell you. But those who will tell you behind closed doors that this man saved my life. This man did what? This man sent so many people for education.
But the opposite of that, Nelson, the opposite of that is also that there was a government in this country at that time.
Yes.
And that is the government that owned Caspias that were running over our Mahangu field. That is the government that existed at that time.
Yes.
That is the government in which your grandfather was serving. So how do you justify a government with all these Vambu ministers whose Caspias and other things were happening there and that ran over our Mahangu field, that shot people? And now we just want to say, no, these guys were actually on the right side of history.
No, Toivo, don't get it wrong. Understand that these administrations were serving differently. There was an interim government that was serving in its own nature. They were controlling this military. And most of all, the control and the command was coming from Pretoria. Now these Kalangula, them and the leaders of these ethnic groups, they were not rolling with that.
So they should have said, if the instructions are coming from Pretoria, then we don't want anything to do with this administration.
Of course. Why do you think he was hated by the administration itself? He was not loved by the administration. People know that. There was even an assassination attempt that he was declaring and saying, this could have not been SWAPO. It could have been easily this administration that does not equally want me. Why would a person be a collaborator when the very administration also doesn't want him? But they did not have the power to remove him because he was protecting his people in Novambuland. But they do not speak about that. This is the problem. But I tell you, people should read what I wrote. Because I prefer people giving a review after they read.
Absolutely.
Many people were shooting at me when this book came out. Even our first interview. But you have to have a thick skin to come up with things like this. But I say, let's read first before we comment. Learn from what was written, take another book out of that, and find other figures to write about. Because we need all the stories.
I agree.
This is what drives our debates.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it's just hearsay everywhere.
It's an important conversation, I must tell you that. So you have actually brought back a very, very important discourse, and again, I congratulate you for coming up with this. And I just want to, because Namibian authors are not writing books like this. It's about how they became this. It's about themselves, which I really do not like. I think people must document history. People must write about the post-independent Namibia. People like myself, who is a journalist and has been in this space for so long. Of course, I write already in the newspaper, but we need something similar. So we have run out of time. Congratulations, but tell us where this can be found.
Right, thank you so much. Currently, the books are sold out, but I've put in an order, a print, and the book will come to Namibia next week. So it can be found at Pepata. I'll put some of the copy. Pepata restaurant in Kleinvenduk. The owner is Yolokeni. And in Novambuland at his residence in Ondangwa, near to Metro and Ekamuti Lodge. And of course, he also put some copies there in Victoria Bookshop, close to Universal Church and Tafel House in Ongwediva. And of course, those at the coast can contact me directly on 081-2890-877. Then I should be able to bring a copy to them. But of course, we are busy testing the market, and I'm overwhelmed how this book sold very fast. To such a point that I ran out of copies. But of course, I'm willing to give the Namibian a good stories, and this is what I brought forward so far.
Absolutely.
Yes.
No, well done. We will. So what I will do now? I'm going to immerse myself into the book. And then I'll be calling you back to challenge some of the specific things as far as the content is concerned. So thank you, Nelson, for coming.
Thank you so much, Teiva.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
That is Nelson Kalangula. Is author of this very important book in the space of our history, A Namibian of Stature, and it's really a biography of Bishop Peter Kalangula, and his nephew is defending his, rather grandson, is defending his grandfather's legacy, and you must grab yourself a copy so that this very important conversation can continue. Thank you for watching.